Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, and their organizations adapt and thrive in a fast-changing world. Today, we're going to be talking about the power of belonging, and specifically belonging to a professional association like AICPA and CIMA and volunteering for your profession. Joining me is Okorie Ramsey, CPA, CGMA, PMP, and NADC.CD. He's a vice president of Sarbanes Oxley or SOX reporting at the Kaiser Foundation Health Plan, Inc. and Kaiser Foundation Hospitals, also known as Kaiser Permanente. He's the chair of the American Institute of CPAs and the chair of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, also known as AICPA and CIMA. Throughout his career, Ramsey has served in several AICPA volunteer roles: the AICPA Board of Directors, the Association Board of Directors, the AICPA and Association Audit and Finance Committee Chair, the AICPA Investments Committee, and AICPA Council. That's a lot going on. He's also been very active in NABA, the National Association of Black Accountants, and he actually has a daytime job. In his current role at Kaiser Permanente, he oversees SOX and model audit rule compliance, which includes strategy, testing, and evaluating internal controls and assessing business risk to help ensure effective internal controls over financial reporting for the integrated healthcare enterprise. Also an active member from the California Society of CPAs as well. Okorie, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, Tom. Thanks for having me join this live with you.
So what I love about you, Okorie, is you have a genuine passion for the profession. I've seen you with students and among state societies and other groups at conferences, and you just light up with pride and passion about this profession. Tell the audience a little bit about what drives you. Where does that come from?
Well, Tom, I think it really goes back to just my start within the profession. The fact that I started as a student in high school, looking at how I wanted to go into accounting after participating in an accounting set of classes while I was in high school at Berkeley High. And then going off to college and having a great experience in college and joining multiple organizations, including NABA as a student leader, and then also Beta Alpha Psi and the Accounting Students Organization. From there, going into the profession, starting my career in public accounting with Coopers & Lybrand, but also having had interned with Deloitte, with Coopers, and also Anderson. So I have real well-rounded entrance into the profession. But really, it's been just an amazing journey of just great experiences throughout my career to be on the audit side, on the internal audit side, working in private industry as well. I've worked for a publicly traded company, and now I've been working with Kaiser Permanente for the last 15 years. And I found an organization where I am able to bridge my personal passions around the profession with the core work that I do every day in terms of my job at SOX. And the ability to do those things just continue to inspire me, and it allows me to really have this impact that I do in the profession. So whether it's I'm working with students or talking with professionals in business administration or talking to individuals who've been in public accounting, I have the benefit of having had those different experiences that allow me to speak to those different populations within our profession. And I'm just inspired every time that I, get an audience with any of those groups to really be able to try to, either help in their different spaces that they're working in or giving advice to students on how to really have a proactive and thriving career.
Yeah, I have to say, and I've talked to you about this, but certainly to have your employer supporting you in a role as big and important as you are in a major company or nonprofit, by the way, we have to emphasize, which is very, very unique and cool as well. But having that kind of role and being able to do what you do, it's incredible. So first of all, I want to say my gratitude to get to know you and see you doing this. And our whole profession definitely appreciates what you're doing. So now let's talk about a little bit about what you're seeing. So you've been out on the road quite a bit talking to CPAs and CGMAs literally all over the world. Tell us a little bit about what you're telling the profession, and more importantly, what are you hearing from the profession from that standpoint?
Outstanding, Tom. So I will tell you that my top three priorities are really focused on continuing to innovate within the profession so that we continue to advance the profession, instilling trust and integrity into key areas such as sustainability, and then also supporting the next generation of accountants and giving them equitable opportunities to advance and succeed within their careers. Those are my three primary, areas of focus, but also working collaboratively with the state societies and ensuring that we are supporting our members, which are really combined members of both, the AICPA as well as the state societies, in terms of advancing the work that they do within their home states and other geographies in which they work, diversity, equity, inclusion, and then advancing and driving agility. So those are the areas that I'm focused on and that I continue to communicate as I'm engaging with, state society leaders, regulators, people within the profession, and those that we engage with. Now, what I'm also hearing, and I talk with professionals, I talk with students, just about what are we experiencing. Well, on the student front, it's really about looking at how the work that we do within the profession and how they want to work in spaces where they feel inspired, right? Where it's more than just I'm coming in, I'm clocking, and I'm doing my 8 to 10 hours of work, but I don't necessarily see the value in what I'm creating and what I'm doing that ultimately helps to create a better world. They really have a broader view than maybe what you or I or people who maybe one generation removed thought about what the profession should be and how and what their role would be in that. They are also thinking about salaries and looking at how competitive we are compared to other fields that, or whether it's other areas of finance or other fields such as technology. And that making sure that if I'm entering into the accounting profession, how do I ensure that I'm getting into a role where I've got a lot of opportunity, but also fairly compensated with what other things that I'm seeing. I believe they also want to make sure that they feel like the work that they do, they just can see the value in that. And that's again from the student perspective. When I talk to professionals, really they're trying to look at their business models. The environment's changing. They're thinking about how do they acquire the most top talent, to support their clients and advance the work that they're doing. How do they deal with things like ESG or the cybersecurity risk? There are a lot of different areas that are continue to come at the profession that they're trying to juggle, right? And then you take into account what people in business and industry are dealing with. So your finance professionals, which we often talk about in terms of the future of finance, you have multiple things. You have talent. You have recession risk. You've got these new dynamic things like cyber and or AI and ESG, diversity, equity, inclusion that they're dealing with on top of the normal day job of being in a strategic advisor or a trusted advisor within their own organizations and having a seat at the table when key business decisions are being made about how they're going to grow and advance their companies. And then having support from different service providers who can aid and abet in what they're trying to do. So I just see a broad array of various issues and how we at the AICPA and CIMA can really help them with whether it's guidance, it's thought leadership, it's advocacy in terms of how we support what they're doing in their day-to-day work.
Wow, you just gave me, I could probably talk for another 2 hours with all those pieces you just broke down, Okorie, by the way. So I'm going to go and say, let's double click quickly into ESG, because you and I, a while back, were just at the ESG symposium in New York City, hosted by AICPA and CPA.com. Share some of your big thoughts about that. And then I want to double click into advocacy, because you had some breaking news that you broke at that meeting. So tell me a little bit about your experience with that ESG symposium, because we were there for Future Finance, representing kind of voice of finance. But talk about what was going on, and then we'll talk about your exciting announcement from California.
Fantastic. Well, so at the ESG Summit, actually ESG Symposium, this was actually my first time participating in one of these events, which was hosted by CPA.com. And it was a wonderful event. We had approximately 60 leaders within the profession that were present. Whether there were people from business and industry leaders, we had regulatory leaders as well, and then we had people who were in the profession from a service provider perspective, whether it's a public accounting firm or consulting services. And we talked about what's the regulatory landscape look like, around ESG. What are the expectations that the regulators have around how corporations and service providers who are supporting those organizations with their ESG reporting, what are the expectations that they have, and what do we, in terms of documentation support, and what we see coming down the pike in terms of timing of when these regulatory changes will be required. We heard from business leaders that are servicing clients around how they're making sure that they have the right skill sets and people to ultimately execute on the ESG work, whether it's I'm setting up a new practice because ESG is becoming a real thing in my environment, and I need to make sure that I've got the right people and skill sets to ultimately support. We had a conversation around are people who are either helping to put together ESG reports with clients so they can make sure that they have the right documentation support for whether it's what they're doing around greenhouse gas emissions or what they're doing around social justice, how they're really governing their practices. All those spaces are areas where firms could really help companies put that information together. But then there's also the flip side of that, which is the attestation, of that information. And so how do you make sure that you've got the right team and skill set to evaluate the effectiveness of a client's documentation and evidence supporting what they're putting in their ESG reporting. And it's so important that whether you're doing some type of sustainability reporting independent of your audited financial statements, some individuals are looking at how they choose to disclose their work in ESG as part of their financial statements. And that just reinforces why we really have to have adequate documentation and controls around the information that we're putting into those reports. And so when we talked about kind of from a future finance perspective, myself and a CFO joined you for a conversation just around that very topic of what are the expectations of how we lead, both from a private company perspective and also from a nonprofit perspective. The lens that I gave from a nonprofit perspective is that ESG has been really part of our foundation from the very beginning, the founding of our organization, and how we have made sure that from a social justice perspective that in our hospitals, way back when many hospitals were segregated, we were integrated. And that was not the norm. Also, in terms of air pollution, we would actually put in clean air pollution type of tools and resources within our environment, ultimately to help support just the greater environment. And since 2020, we've been carbon neutral. So those are just some examples of the things that we talked about. And then we had some exercises where we had the different groups break out and talk about some of what do we anticipate as challenges as we continue to look to implement ESG, and what are some of the just environmental issues that we're dealing with in that space. And to your point, the news that we broke is that in California, and I'm just so proud of Cal CPA, my home state society, that they entered legislation so legislation was recently passed through the assembly that for greenhouse gas emissions, there will be a requirement that the information be verified and really attested to, for the accuracy of the information starting in 2025, going into 2026. And ultimately, the guidelines that are identified there, while we don't specifically say it must be a CPA who ultimately certifies to the completeness and accuracy of the information, there's language that we use within the legislation that really can direct you to where it would be someone who would have the qualifications to do that kind of work, the attestation type of work. And what I'm saying is in more recent articles that have been coming out, that the individuals who are writing those articles are referencing how you will need to have a CPA, or you'll need to have your information audited, right? And so it's speaking our language. So while again we didn't put that language in, that's how it's being framed, and it really gives us the opportunity to have a seat at the table where we're at the head of the table as a profession to really support organizations as they do this work. And when I think about it, and I know I'm passionate about this, that we are uniquely qualified because of the experience that we bring in this space to truly lead. And so firms, whether again you are in the attestation space where you're going to be auditing the accuracy of the information, or you are working diligently to help organizations get prepared for that reporting, we have that skill set because we've had a long line of looking at accuracy of financial information and ensuring that we've got the right documentation for it.
Yeah, so two things that stick out for me from this conversation. First of all, you're a living example, Okorie, of how this works, because you went through the whole Sarbanes-Oxley implementation, so to speak, and that's what you're an expert in at Kaiser. And yet that, in fact, skill set is what's now being applied by many corporates to use for the whole ESG reporting concept, right? And that's what you're doing at Kaiser.
Yeah, complete spot on, Tom. I am part of our ESG development committee for our organization. So as we're putting together our reporting, I'm looking at what we're speaking to around supporting our position around environmental, social, and governance, and bringing that control lens to it to make sure that we mitigate our risk of we're stating something that we can't back up. And so we want to make sure that we've got like how do we track this information that we ultimately are reporting on, or developing metrics and statistics to support our positions, so that we can feel very confident when we go into the public domain that we've got backup and support for our statements, and that is what's going into our report. And then challenging where it feels like maybe we're light on something. Do we have the appropriate documentation for this, in making sure that the individuals who are more on the front line doing the work ultimately think of it with that lens. And so that's kind of the add that I bring to that. But I'm hopeful that many other either organizations or even functions that are providing a service in this space will leverage their SOX people, right, in that vein to really help in this space, because I really believe that skill set is truly valuable in helping to bring that to light.
Yeah, and clearly legislation is basically pointing to that notion, whether it's on the public accounting side, but it's also on the back end, the corporate side. So the other thing that sticks out for me that I think is worth pointing out is the way the Cal CPA legislation happened is how we work as states and the AICPA and CIMA all the time. So it was a joint effort led by the state's legislative team combined with the AICPA-CIMA government relations group, right?
It's exactly right. And thank you for raising that, because that really is something that is truly important, that we think about how we work together as a profession, acting locally and globally in partnering where we can, where it makes sense for us to do work together. And this was an exceptional example of that. To your very point, the team in California really worked because they know the legislators there in California better than anybody, and could determine what do we think we could actually move forward with. And again, for the interest of the public, because really, I want to be clear that I don't think that this is just another opportunity for the accountants to fatten their pockets. I look at this as it's for the public trust, which is part of our responsibility, is ensuring that those who rely on those financial statements or rely on the what we're stating that we're doing from a sustainability perspective, that they can rely on that information and know that there's quality and support behind it. So ensuring that we have that support in place is critically important. So the partnership that we had between the AICPA, the legislative team, and then the state society coming together on that is just a great example of how we partner to the benefit of the greater profession, and we just want to continue to do that. But that's something that I think it's unique to our profession, but I don't believe it's unique to how we lead within the profession. I think we see that time and time again.
Totally agree with that, Okorie. And I've been, I was on the state society side a couple of years ago before I came here to the AICPA and CIMA, and we in Maryland it's the same thing. But it's interesting because I often connected to my other CEOs and other associations like the bar or engineers or some of those, right? And none of those have the same kind of relationship that the AICPA and CIMA have with the state CPA societies and actually overseas in all the regions that were active. And so, to your point, that's a huge advantage because most other professions don't have that level of integration and coordination or collaboration, if you will.
Exactly right. And I'll say to add to that, that the work that I do, as you mentioned at the opening, and thank you again for that really warm introduction, that as chairman of the association, that I have a co-chair, Sarah Ghosh, who really works very closely, who's also the president of CIMA, and we work very closely together and to make sure that we're doing the work that supports the profession globally. And to be in a place where we have almost 700,000 members globally, across the world, and to be able to do this work combined, right? And so that we're really supporting the profession internationally. It's a great partnership. And so I'm so excited that I have that opportunity to do this work, not only with the association, but also with a leader like Sarah, so that we can be, tied at the hip, making sure we're doing the right thing. We have a combined message that really supports the global profession, and it very interchangeably. So it's been a great opportunity, and I am just so pleased that I have the fortune of being in the spot to really lead in the way that I am within the profession.
That's incredible. And I have to add one more piece, which we talked about at that ESG symposium, which is having ESG as a major part of what our profession's focusing on. And I will say, Future Finance added to that. It's also an ability for that corporate CFO, finance professional to actually add value, because there's a value creation element of ESG equally as important as getting the reporting right and compliance. So that's one other angle. And then, by the way, students love the fact to get into a profession that's really focused on helping the world with this ESG initiative. Do you find that true out there in the market?
Completely. And when we actually talked in our LinkedIn Live, about this, you think about all the different spaces in which, the CFOs are challenged. This is another area where we have to continue to, just make sure that we're focused on the right things for the overall profession. And the CFOs that, at least that I engage with, they take that responsibility extremely seriously, and how with all the other things going on in the work that they do, and the I would say the challenges that they're facing, which I kind of alluded to a bit earlier, that's something that I believe they're very focused on. And back to the students, very much the same thing. So I couldn't have said it any better than you, Tom. That's definitely spot on.
That's incredible. And then the other part that's also coming up now is our Future Finance group. We're getting ready to have our next summit in December. But in that group, early on, they decided that we wanted to help them find a diverse pool of talent. That was one of their specific asks, which led to us creating the Registered Apprenticeship Program in the United States, the first for finance and accounting in any industry, but focused on this idea of a finance business partner using our CGMA Finance Leadership Program. And that's off to a really great start with some major corporations that have been adopting it, including HP, Aon, Liberty Bank, Marriott, some of those. But it's interesting because that's addressing this need for a diverse pool of talent and expanding the pipeline for us in an age when we have this constraint of not enough accounting majors coming out. So that's offering another way to get into this pipeline from that standpoint. So we're excited to be working around that as well through our Future Finance group.
Well, and Tom, if I could add to that, I very much realize that we have an opportunity as it relates to our pipeline, that we don't have as many individuals coming into the profession, and there are many reasons, right, why that is, and that we have to look at it not as a single bullet or a silver bullet that will address that. It is multifaceted in terms of how we address that. There's the birth rates, fewer individuals are first of all being born, so you're going to have a smaller population who are going to go to college, and then what's our share, right, of that population that's going into the accounting and moving in within the profession. You have salaries which have increased. So I want to make sure we give firms credit for the work that they've done to increase salaries, but they haven't necessarily continued to increase with the rate that other professions have. And we have to be the best at telling our story about what does the future look like for someone who's entering the profession? So not just for that first couple of years where maybe there might be some small differentials, but in their minds, big differentials because they're young, right? About how much you could possibly make within the profession, but the long-term benefit of what that will ultimately end up being, it can be quite substantial, right? In terms of a benefit to you, but we have to be better at telling that story and making sure they see that, but also the type of work that we do. Sometimes what they have viewed as being, your kind of green eye shade and, sitting in an office, always, you're sitting with a 10K or a 10 key doing work. Our work is so much different, right? We are always working with, clients. I spend more time than not in discussions about complex issues, about how we should look at different business risk and how we address that and mitigate the risk as we're talking about doing, maybe a significant deal that will help to grow the business. These are types of things that we need to make sure that we're helping our younger people understand are part of the job, in that when you're engaging and when you're working in those spaces, how as you lean in and that you're becoming a storyteller, you're thinking about the work that we're doing. It's like the accounting piece, that's just the entry into the door. It's really about, are we being agile? Are we storytellers? Are we able to make sense of data so that we can make informed decisions? That's all really part of the work, and helping them understand that they can be a part of that, and that our senior leaders now need to also be working to help those younger professionals coming out see that. But we also need to make sure that we're being appropriate sponsors and mentors, as well, leading the way. And while I get that we're a lot of people are working remote, we have to create opportunities for us to engage and be connected. And sometimes that's difficult. Like, I'm glad that we're doing what we're doing here between you and I in this virtual environment, but we also can say we've been together just earlier this week, right? So ultimately, those kind of things happen where you combine that virtual aspect with also the sense of connection, which I think is truly important for us to be able to really lead in the way that will give us greater opportunity. So there are many different challenges that we have to face, but I'm so glad that we are, as AICPA and CIMA, actively working on bringing and convening different bodies to think about how we address that, and not only just think about it, but take measurable actions totally to help address the pipeline issue that crosses regulatory individuals, state societies, people in public accounting, and people in business industry as well. So we really are taking a very broad, proactive effort to bring that group together to make sure we're focused on the right things to really advance the profession and address the pipeline issue.
Spot on, Okorie. I knew this was going to be an amazing time together. All right. Well, thank you so much. I want to say for everyone, for more with Okorie, follow him on LinkedIn at Okorie Ramsey. And I'm your host, Tom Hood, the Executive Vice President of Business Engagement and Growth for AICPA and CIMA. I want to thank the audience for joining me live, and don't miss other Future Ready Live sessions back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern. We'll see you then. Thank you again, Okorie.
It's been a pleasure to be with you, Tom, as always. Thank you.